with Harvard. So remember when I was telling you guys that Harvard had a protest all last week and up through the weekend where basically different students, some of which were not even American citizens, but was here on a student visa. Others were looking to get their student visa revoked because they decided that they wanted to bring themselves to the front of the congregation. And alumni, different people, faculty, staff, they were pushing the president of Harvard and their board to stand up against the Trump administration, right? And what they were risking was the possibility of completely losing all funding, okay? All funding. What does that mean? When I say all funding, there was over $9 billion this year alone that is allocated towards Harvard University. And it's not just towards academics, it's towards research, grants, all of these things that a lot of these major universities use to continue to bolster the finances and also the endowment of the university itself. They get these research grants, they get these things that we then ultimately sometimes use, sometimes we don't, but they benefit from American taxpayer dollars, okay? And so they pulled the trigger. They let people put a battery in their back and they said, you know what? We are going to allow for you guys to influence us to take on the Trump administration. And for what? Because all Trump is doing is saying, listen, we don't need anti-Semitism. We don't want our universities to be indoctrination camps. We don't want for these things to be diversity, equity, and inclusion. We need to have people in here based off of merit, not people that don't qualify and somebody else loses a position to be able to get inside of the university. Instead, they decided to jump off the bridge and take on the Trump administration. So, as a result, this is what's going on. Make sure you guys hit a like for the algorithm, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications. I'll bring you guys up to speed because now the Trump administration is saying that Harvard should lose their tax-exempt status if they do not comply, even after he has already taken over $2.9 billion, not million, not thousand, $1 billion of federal funding away from Harvard University. And you would think that they were smarter than that, right? I would think that they were smarter than that.
Escalating confrontation between Harvard and the Trump administration as a university rejects demands to change its policy. First, the White House froze billions of dollars in federal aid. Now the president's saying Harvard should perhaps lose its tax-exempt status. Will Reed is in Cambridge with the latest. Good morning, Will.
Good morning, Robin. The Trump administration says that it's investigating dozens of universities to get rid of anti-Semitism on campus. In this case, Harvard says it has taken steps to do that and is standing firm on its constitutional right by defying the Trump administration's orders. And now the president is suggesting his support for a fundamental change to how Harvard operates.
This morning, the latest on the clash between the White House and Harvard. The president now suggesting the university should lose its tax-exempt status if it doesn't comply with his administration.
Harvard has not taken the president or the administration's demands seriously.
Those demands include that Harvard report foreign students who've committed conduct violations to federal authorities, and all DEI programs and initiatives share hiring data and submit auditing on administrative data to ensure all departments have diverse viewpoints. While the administration has already frozen $2 billion in federal grants and is targeting $7 billion more, Harvard is digging in. The university president writing in a statement, no government, regardless of which party is in power, should dictate what private universities can teach, whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue.
Now, here's my question, all right? Here's my question. Harvard is a private university. All right. Harvard is a private university. They're saying no administration should be able to dictate, no government entity should be able to dictate what they teach, who they allow on campus, and basically allow for them to be able to run their business as they see fit. Cool. I have no problem with that. But why should we continue to support you with taxpayer dollars if you don't meet the expectations of what we've deemed as a society, right? As a culture, as a country? Because let's be clear, he won a majority vote And he also won every single swing state. And so if it's our taxpayer dollars, because the people that are in office, whether you're talking about it on a national scale or whether you're talking about on a local scale, the people in office, hear me clearly, are a reflection of the people that voted for them. So we don't have the ability to determine whether or not Harvard get research dollars or whether or not they can do this or whether or not they can do that. We don't have that capacity to do it. But what we can do is elect the people that represent our best interests as taxpayers. And so if they then say that we want to remove ourselves from meeting the expectations of what this current administration and the federal government, because we have no problem with just giving all of our money away when it's under a Democratic president like Biden, which we'll get to later on in the show. We have no problem with that whatsoever. No problem. Nobody bats an eye. Nobody thinks about it. Nobody is evaluating what the budget is. Nobody is having a conversation. You know, they'll kick out whoever conservative, or if somebody got a completely different viewpoint, freedom of speech, they'll remove them from the campus and say, no, this is private property. This is private college. Well, then I think that my dollar should be private also. No? Now, I know that Columbia said that, you know what? We're not necessarily interested in battling against the Trump administration. We're going to meet all of the requirements because we got to make sure that we take care of the people. And it's not even that the possibility that the policies that the Trump administration is telling them to implement is a bad thing. When did it become bad to not be racist? Basically allow for people to be able to get in on merit. When did it become a problem for there to be diversity of conversation and thought? Meaning that we shouldn't be operating in an echo chamber in a silo. I don't even operate in an echo chamber in a silo here on the Millionaire Morning Show right here on YouTube.
President Obama writing on social media, Harvard has set an example for other higher ed.
President Obama is writing on X. He's leveraging his free speech on a platform that does not censor liberals, even though they hate Elon Musk. Imagine that. People mobilize on a platform against the person that owns the platform, and he allows them to do it because he actually believes in American values and removing censorship.
Institutions rejecting an unlawful and ham-handed attempt to stifle academic freedom. Let's hope other institutions follow suit.
And overnight, a Harvard law professor telling ABC News that this could all go to court and that Harvard has a strong legal position in the way of First Amendment and Civil Rights Act protections that do not permit the Trump administration to do.
So let's look at it from a completely different view, because I always like to go to different sources. I want to go more to the liberal sources, and then I also source from more conservative views. So we're going to go over to Fox News and get their take on it, and then I'll give you my thoughts, and then we'll move over to the next part of the show.
And welcome back here. Sue Live now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. What we want to do right now is take up some time to kind of dive into in detail for you this brewing battle between the Ivy League campuses like Harvard and Columbia and the Trump administration. Our colleague Fox's Rebecca Castor has a look at this battle. Let's watch.
The Trump administration is not soon forgetting the widespread pro-Palestine protests that swept across university campuses last year. Some of the international student leaders are facing deportation, and now federal funding is on the line.
We have been addressing the issue of anti-Semitism on campuses. There's been some grant funding and contract funding that we've reviewed, and some we've canceled and some we've put on hold.
Harvard is the latest school to have billions in federal grants and contracts put on hold after university leaders refused government demands, including to eliminate DEI programs, report foreign students here on visas who violate codes of conduct, and return to merit-based hiring and admissions.
These higher ed institutions that have fundamentally lost their way, U.S. taxpayer dollars should never be propping up anti-Semitism.
Agreed.
Harvard is the 7th school targeted by the Trump administration, but it's the first to push back, with the university's president saying in part, quote, "No government, regardless of which party is in power, should dictate what private universities can teach, whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue."
Harvard University today said, "Go to hell."
Harvard's move also drawing praise from alum and former President Barack Obama, who says other institutions should follow suit. Harvard says it has already taken action against anti-Semitism on campus and argues many of Trump's demands are not related. In Washington, Rebecca Castor, Fox News.
So essentially what you see is Bernie Sanders, Barack Obama, and others who have no vested interest in what happens at these universities, aren't even alum of these universities. Barack Obama don't even go back to Chicago. The only time he ever is seen appearing in Chicago is when he's trying to finish his presidential library and he wants to be seen in a photo op. Kids don't go back to Chicago. Barack don't go back to Chicago. They don't even have a home still in Chicago. They out of there. They gone. So miss me with the nonsense. But they're putting the battery inside of Harvard's back. They don't have their back. And it's going to end up in a situation where it's absolutely positively dire. I would never take on the federal government. I would never take on the Trump administration. And especially when it's coming at the behest of the students. You know, these endowments and these monies that is being spent over at these universities, they help to keep tuition down. They help when it comes to grants for people that can't afford to go there, that still want to compete. The money is allocated and dedicated in a lot of different ways, but more importantly, losing billions of dollars in funding is never going to be a good situation. So in summary, the Trump administration is recommending that they basically lose their tax-exempt status. I don't know if that's going to actually play out. However, Anton over here at AntonDaniels.com and the Millionaire Morning Show will keep you guys up to date on what's going on out in these streets, because I definitely want you guys to be informed.